What exactly were my parents doing wrong? This question kept spinning in my head. Suddenly, I remembered Napoleon. Oh goodness, I had almost completely forgotten about him in all this excitement. I suggested to Money that we run over to the Hannenkamps' house to take the poor dog out for a walk. We decided to have a serious talk about my father's debts right after dinner. That conversation promised to be incredibly interesting, especially since helping my parents get out of this debt trap was one of my 3 biggest wishes. Money had confidently stated that it was actually very simple. This thought made me smile happily all the way there. Mr. Hannenkamp was already waiting by the window, watching for us. As soon as Napoleon saw me, he started whining with joy and jumping around. I said hello to the owners and headed towards the forest with both dogs. But just as we reached the edge of the woods, Napoleon suddenly bolted like an arrow. He had spotted a rabbit and decided he had to catch it no matter what. I whistled and called him with all my might, but the dog seemed completely deaf to my voice. He was only interested in that rabbit. I had no choice but to stand there and wait. Right then, I firmly decided that Napoleon needed to be taught obedience before anything else. After about 10 minutes, he finally came back, breathless but happy. We spent the rest of our time working hard on his training. I praised him and gave him treats for even the smallest successes. Monty stayed close and perfectly followed every command I gave, setting a great example for the other dog. This was a huge help in our work. After a couple of hours, Napoleon was already performing the sit command quite well. I took him home and proudly showed the Hannenkamps what their pet had learned. Mrs. Hannenkamp could hardly believe her eyes. Clapping her hands, she exclaimed, "I honestly thought Napoleon was a hopeless case, but he really sits on command. This is like a dream." Mr. Hannenkamp smiled broadly. He was glad he hadn't been wrong, as it was his idea for me to train the dog in the first place. The man reached into his pocket and solemnly pulled out a thick wallet. Taking out 10 euros, he handed them to me. When I took the money, a strange feeling of shame suddenly washed over me. So much money. I thought to myself, after all, it had cost me almost no effort, and I had enjoyed doing it so much. But out loud, I only said, it was actually very easy. Mr. Hannenkamp suddenly burst into laughter. He looked quite unusual then, his face twisting into a strange grimace that almost scared me at first. But when he calmed down, he looked at me warmly and became very pleasant again. Most people believe that work must always be something difficult and unpleasant, he said wisely. But you can only achieve real success when you do something you truly love. I didn't quite understand him, so he gave me a questioning look. Don't you know anyone who earns money by doing what they enjoy? Immediately, I thought of my cousin Marcel. He loves riding his bike, so he started a bakery delivery business specifically for that reason. I told Mr. Hannenkamp about him. He nodded with satisfaction. A good example. That boy will go far. One day, I'll tell you about my own life. I've also always done only what I liked, and I made a fortune from it. I looked at him with curiosity. His face really did remind me of an old adventure book. It seemed like he had lived through a lot. Soon, it was time to say goodbye. At home, my favorite pasta bake and a chocolate pudding were waiting for me. However, I couldn't focus on the food at all. Life had become so exciting.